The streets of Boston were sunny that September morning, but a chilly wind heralded the arrival of autumn. Olivia Bennet, an 8-year-old girl with blonde hair and frightened blue eyes, walked alone along busy Newbury Street. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her purple backpack tightly. She was lost. "Mommy?" she called softly, barely audible over the din of traffic and the chatter of passers-by. Executives in a hurry, college students absorbed in their phones, tourists consulting maps. They all passed by little Olivia without noticing her distress. Or maybe they did, but decided it wasn't their concern. Across the street, Marcus Johnson, a tall, thin, 17-year-old black teenager, was returning from the public library with a stack of architecture books. Wearing headphones and a grey Boston Tech high school sweatshirt, he almost walked right past her, but something made him stop. "Hey, are you okay?" Marcus asked, removing his headphones and crouching down to Olivia's eye level. The girl took a hesitant step back. Her mother always told her not to talk to strangers. "I'm looking for my mom," she replied, her voice shaking. "We were at the bookstore and I stopped to look at the coloring books. When I looked again, she was gone." Marcus looked around. The street was busy, but no one seemed to be looking for a child. "How long have you been here alone?" "I don't know." "A long time," Olivia replied, wiping away her tears. "I'll help you find your mum," Marcus offered with a gentle smile. "What's your name?" "Olivia Bennet," she replied, starting to feel a little safer. Marcus's smile froze for a second. Bennet. Like Mayor Robert Bennet, it couldn't be a coincidence in a city like Boston. "Nice to meet you, Olivia. I'm Marcus. Do you know your mother's phone number or where you live?" Olivia nodded. "I live on Beacon Hill, in the big white house with the black gates." Confirmation Marcus didn't need. She was the mayor's daughter, the same mayor who had cut funding for the minority scholarship program Marcus depended on for his college education next year. A security camera from the clothing store next door silently captured the entire interaction, including the dozens of people who had ignored the distressed child before Marcus stopped to help her. "Let's find your mother," Marcus said, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia took it. What neither of them knew was that this simple gesture would forever change their lives and expose the racial and political tensions simmering beneath the surface of the city they both called home. The taxi stopped in front of the imposing house on Beacon Hill. Marcus looked out the window, awed by the grandeur of the Bennet residence. Elegant white columns, immaculate garden, and a commanding view of the city. A world away from the small apartment he shared with his single mother and 2 younger sisters in the Roxbury neighborhood. "This is it," Olivia confirmed, now calmer after Marcus bought her an ice cream cone during the ride. Marcus paid the taxi driver with the money he'd been saving for a new pair of sneakers. "Come on, let's go find your parents." As they approached the gate, a uniformed security guard intercepted them with a suspicious look. "Can I help you?" he asked coldly, his gaze fixed on Marcus. "I found this lost girl on Newbury Street," Marcus explained. "She said she lives here. It's Olivia Bennet." The security guard's face changed instantly. "Miss Olivia, your mother is desperately looking for you." He immediately activated his radio. "We found Miss Olivia. She's at the main gate." Within seconds, an elegant woman in her 40s came running down the garden's stone path. Catherine Bennet, the mayor's wife, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes, looked as if she'd recently cried. "Olivia!" she cried, rushing to hug her daughter. "My God, where have you been? We've looked everywhere." As mother and daughter embraced, Marcus stood still, suddenly feeling out of place in the scene. "Mommy, this is Marcus," Olivia pointed out. "He helped me when I was lost. No one else stopped." Catherine looked at Marcus, noticing him for the first time. Her initial look of distrust quickly turned to gratitude. "Thank you for bringing my daughter home safely," she said, her voice sincere. "Please come in. I'm sure my husband will want to thank you in person." Marcus hesitated. "No need, ma'am. I just did what anyone would do." "But no one else did," Catherine replied. "Please, I insist." At that exact moment, a black SUV screeched to a halt in the driveway. Mayor Robert Bennet, a tall, gray-haired man in an impeccable suit, hurried out. His face showed relief at seeing his daughter, but his eyes narrowed slightly when he noticed Marcus. "Olivia," he exclaimed, hugging her. "Thank God you're okay." "Dad, this is Marcus. He helped me when I was lost." Robert Bennet studied Marcus for a moment before extending his hand. "Robert Bennet, thank you for helping my daughter, young man." Marcus shook the mayor's hand. "Marcus Johnson, sir." It was nothing. Johnson. The mayor repeated the last name as if trying to remember something. "Where are you from, Marcus?" "Roxbury, sir. I go to Boston Tech High." A flash of recognition passed through the mayor's eyes. Marcus realized he knew exactly who the Johnson family was. His mother, Denise Johnson, was a vocal activist for educational equity and had publicly confronted the mayor about budget cuts to schools in predominantly black neighborhoods during a public hearing months earlier. "Please come in," the mayor insisted, his voice professional, like the one he used at public events. "I'd like to speak with you." As Marcus followed the family into the mansion, he didn't notice the security camera at the entrance recording their arrival, nor did he imagine how this footage would soon become one of the most discussed images on social media in the city. The interior of the Bennett mansion was exactly as Marcus had imagined. Marble floors, artwork on the walls, furniture that looked like it had never been used. A uniformed maid offered him a glass of water while he waited in the living room. Sitting on the white leather sofa, Marcus felt uncomfortably self-conscious about his worn sneakers and ratty school sweatshirt. Robert Bennett returned after a few minutes, now without his jacket and with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He sat in the armchair across from Marcus. "Catherine is putting Olivia to rest. She was quite shaken," the mayor explained. "We can't thank you enough for what you did today." Marcus nodded. "Anyone would have done the same, sir." "But they didn't, did they?" Bennett observed, taking a sip of his drink. "You're Denise Johnson's son, aren't you? I remember her from some of the public hearings." Marcus felt a knot in his stomach. "Yes, sir. Your mother is a woman passionate about her causes. So I admire that, even when I disagree with her." Before Marcus could respond, Catherine Bennett entered the room, now more composed. "Did they offer you something to drink, Marcus?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." Catherine sat beside her husband. "How exactly did you find Olivia?" Marcus explained in detail how he had seen Olivia alone on the street, crying, while dozens of people passed by without stopping to help her. "And you decided to help," Catherine concluded, her expression showing a mixture of gratitude and something else. Shame, perhaps. "It was the right thing to do," Marcus replied simply. Robert Bennett watched the young man intently. "You mentioned you attend Boston Tech High. Are you a senior?" "Yes, sir. I want to study architecture at university." "And what school do you plan to go to?" Marcus hesitated. "I have a partial scholarship to MIT, but—" He trailed off, not wanting to mention that the cuts to minority scholarship policies approved by the Bennett administration had significantly reduced his financial aid. "But," the mayor insisted. "I still need additional financial assistance," Marcus concluded diplomatically. An uncomfortable silence hung in the room until Catherine broke it. "We'd like to do something for you, Marcus. A reward." Marcus shook his head. "I don't need a reward, Mrs. Bennett." "Really?" Robert Bennett stood up. "I insist. At the very least, we should help with your college expenses. It's the least we can do." The offer took Marcus by surprise. It was exactly what he needed, but something bothered him about the way it was presented, as charity, not recognition. "I appreciate it, but I can't accept it," Marcus replied, also standing up. "I didn't do this expecting anything in return." The mayor seemed surprised and slightly irritated by the refusal. "Young man, do you have any idea how many students would give anything for an opportunity like this?" "I know, sir, and many of those students saw their dreams dashed when scholarship programs for minorities were cut in the last city budget." The words were out before Marcus could stop them. The mayor's face hardened. "Budget politics are more complicated than they appear on the surface, son. Tough decisions need to be made." "How do you decide who deserves an opportunity and who doesn't?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. Catherine intervened, sensing the growing tension. "Robert, Marcus didn't come here to discuss policy. He came to bring our daughter to safety." Just then, Olivia appeared in the classroom doorway, still in her school uniform. "Is Marcus leaving?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, dear," Catherine replied. "He needs to come home." "Will you come back to visit me?" Olivia asked innocently. Marcus smiled at her. "Maybe someday." Robert Bennett walked Marcus to the door. On the way, they passed an office where several screens displayed local news broadcasts. On one of them, Marcus saw something that made him stop, a frozen image of him and Olivia walking hand in hand down the street. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to the screen. The mayor stared, his expression unchanged. "Looks like someone captured the moment you helped my daughter. News travels fast in this city." As Marcus left the mansion, An unsettling feeling followed him. He had no idea how that image, captured by an anonymous security camera, was about to become the center of a storm that would shake Boston to its foundations. The next morning, Marcus woke to the phone ringing incessantly. It was his mother, Denise, who had been up since 5 in the morning for her shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. "Marcus, you need to watch the news, now." Still drowsy, Marcus turned on the small television in the room. The local newscaster spoke seriously. The image circulating on social media shows the moment Marcus Johnson, a 17-year-old student at Boston Tech High, helps Olivia Bennett, Mayor Robert Bennett's 8-year-old daughter, after she got lost downtown. What made the image go viral was the security camera footage showing that dozens of people, predominantly white, ignored the distressed child before the young black man stopped to help her. The screen showed the entire sequence: Olivia crying on the sidewalk, people walking right past her, and then Marcus stopping, bending down and offering help. "Oh my God," Marcus murmured. The images raised questions about racial prejudice and social indifference, especially considering that the Bennett administration recently cut funding for social programs in predominantly black and Latino neighborhoods. Marcus's phone vibrated again. Messages were starting to arrive from friends, classmates, and even people he barely knew. His name was everywhere. Denise Johnson arrived home early in the afternoon, exhausted after a double shift, but her eyes shone with a mixture of pride and concern. "You didn't tell me you were the mayor's daughter," she said, hugging her son. "I didn't think it was important," Marcus replied. "I just helped a lost child, Mom." "Well, now you've become the symbol of something much bigger," Denise sighed, showing her phone. Social media was abuzz. Hashtags like "Muchung Marcos did the right" and "Who would stop for a black child, check it out" were spreading rapidly. Polarized comments dominated the discussions. "He just did what any decent person would do. Why is this news?" Because we know that if it were a lost black child, white people would have ignored it too. The mayor cuts social programs that benefit black communities, but relies on a young black man to save his daughter. Ironic, isn't it? The doorbell rang. Marcus opened the door and found a reporter with a cameraman. "Marcus Johnson? I'm Diana Lewis from Channel 7. Can we have a quick interview about the incident with the mayor's daughter?" Before Marcus could answer, Denise appeared at his side. "My son won't be doing interviews right now. Please respect our privacy." But that was just the first of many interview requests that came in that day. Across town at the Bennett mansion, the situation wasn't much different. Reporters crowded at the gates waiting for an official statement. Robert Bennett sat in his office, watching the news with a somber expression as his aides discussed communications strategies. "We need to publicly thank the young man," insisted Michael Torres, his communications advisor. "Show gratitude, perhaps announce some initiative related to child safety." "What about the accusations of hypocrisy regarding the cuts to social programs?" asked Sandra Miller, his chief of staff. "They're directly linking the incident to your policies toward minority neighborhoods." The mayor massaged his temples, feeling the onset of a migraine. "This is ridiculous. These are completely separate issues. The boy did a good deed, yes, and I'm grateful to him. But turning this into a political circus is absurd." Catherine entered the room, visibly disturbed. "Olivia is frightened by all this attention. The kids at school are talking about it. We need to do something, Robert." The mayor nodded. "I'll make a statement thanking the young man publicly and asking them to leave our family and his alone." "It's not enough," Catherine replied, her voice firm. "You've seen the comments online. People are questioning why no one else stopped to help. Why it took 47 adults to walk past our daughter before someone showed compassion. And why that someone was a young man from a community your administration has neglected." Robert stared at his wife, surprised by her candor. "What do you suggest, then? That you really listen to what's happening here, Robert? This isn't just about Olivia or Marcus. It's about who we've become as a city." Meanwhile, at Boston Tech High School, Principal Thomas Wilson called an emergency meeting with the faculty. "Marcus Johnson has unwittingly become the center of a political and racial firestorm," he explained. "As an institution, we need to protect him, but also use this moment as an educational opportunity." Social studies teacher Angela Davis raised her hand. "Students are discussing it in every class. Maybe we should create a space for constructive dialogue." "I agree," Wilson replied. "But we have to be careful. The last thing we want is to deepen the division that's already brewing in the city." By the end of that day, The image of Marcus and Olivia had become much more than a record of an act of kindness. It was now the catalyst for a long-overdue conversation about race, privilege, and social responsibility in one of America's most segregated cities. And both Marcus and the Bennett family were in the eye of this storm whether they wanted to be or not. 3 days after the incident, Marcus's life had been completely transformed. Walking through the halls of Boston Tech High now meant being followed by stares, whispers, and the occasional request for a selfie. Some treated him like a hero, others resented the attention he received. "Do you have any idea what happened to the volunteer applications at the community center?" asked Jamal, his best friend since elementary school, as they walked to calculus class. "Tripled. Everyone wants to be like the famous Marcus Johnson." Marcus shook his head uncomfortably. "That's not why I helped that girl." "I know, man. But you've become a symbol whether you like it or not." In the teacher's lounge, the discussion was equally heated. "The video reached 5 million views," the science teacher commented, adjusting his glasses. "It even made the national news." "The most impressive thing was the count," the literature teacher added. "Someone literally counted 47 adults passing by that child in 15 minutes before Marcus stopped." "And everyone's asking the same question," Angela Davis, the social studies teacher, added. "If it had been a black child, how many would have passed by before someone stopped?" Principal Wilson entered the room, interrupting the conversation. "I got a call from City Hall. Mayor Bennett wants to hold a public event to thank Marcus for helping his daughter. Something about an exemplary citizenship award." The teachers exchanged skeptical glances. "Pure political strategy," someone muttered. "Regardless of the motivation," Wilson replied, "we need to consider what's best for Marcus. It's a lot of pressure for a teenager." Meanwhile, at the Bennett residence, a strategy meeting was underway. Aides, political consultants, and public relations experts debated how to turn the crisis into an opportunity. "A public event showing gratitude is essential," Michael Torres insisted. "But it needs to be more than that. It needs to demonstrate a commitment to racial reconciliation." Robert Bennett looked weary. Internal polls showed a significant drop in his approval rating since the incident. The image of his daughter being ignored by dozens of people in one of the city's most affluent areas, followed by her rescue by a black teenager from a poor neighborhood, was devastating to his narrative of a Boston for all. "What do you suggest, then?" she asked impatiently. "A new program," Sandra Miller replied. "Something substantial about youth mentoring, exchanges between schools in different neighborhoods, maybe even a college scholarship fund." Catherine, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "What if this isn't just a political gesture? What if we actually did something meaningful?" Everyone turned to her, surprised. "What do you have in mind?" Robert asked. "Olivia won't stop talking about Marcus. She sees him as a hero. Maybe we should really get to know the young man, his family, understand his reality before deciding what to do for them." In the Johnson kitchen, a side conversation was taking place. Denise had called her sister, Tanya, and some close friends to discuss how to handle the situation. "CNN called today," Denise informed her. "They want an interview with you, Marcus." "I don't want to be on TV," Marcus replied, frustrated. "This is getting out of hand." "Son," said Pastor Williams, leader of the community church the Johnsons attended, "sometimes God puts opportunities in our path not for our glory, but for a greater purpose." "What would be the purpose of turning me into a spectacle?" Marcus asked. "Maybe to give a voice to those who aren't heard," Tanya replied. "How many times have we protested the cuts to programs supporting Black and Latino youth? How many times have we been ignored? Now the whole city is paying attention." Marcus considered his aunt's words. "So you think I should use this as a platform?" "We're not saying that," Denise clarified. "We're saying you should think carefully before turning down opportunities that could make a difference." The phone rang. Denise answered and her expression changed. "It's for you, Marcus." Catherine Bennett. Marcus picked up the phone, surprised. "Hello, Mrs. Bennett." "Marcus, thank you for answering. I'd like to invite you and your family to dinner at our house tomorrow night. No press, no politics. Just two families, Marcus covered the phone and explained the invitation to his mother and the others present. Reactions were mixed. "It could be a political trap," Tanya warned. "Or it could be a sincere opportunity for dialogue," Pastor Williams countered. Denise studied her son. "What do you think, Marcus?" Marcus thought of Olivia, the scared girl who just wanted to go home. He thought of the 47 adults who had passed her by, the privilege and the indifference. He thought of his own architectural dreams, the barriers he faced, the budget cuts that had hindered his path to university. "We'll accept," he decided, turning back to the phone. "We'll be there, Mrs. Bennet." As he hung up, Marcus wasn't sure if he'd made the right decision. But one thing was certain, that dinner would be much more than just a meal between two families. It would be a meeting between two worlds that, though separated by only a few geographical miles, rarely intersected in Boston. And all eyes in the city would be, albeit indirectly, on what would unfold at that table. The light rain falling over Boston that evening seemed fitting for the tense atmosphere. The taxi carrying the Johnson family pulled up outside the imposing gates of the Bennet mansion. Denise nervously adjusted the pearl necklace she had inherited from her mother, the only piece of valuable jewelry she owned. Marcus, wearing a blazer borrowed from Pastor Williams, took a deep breath. "Remember," Denise told her children, "we are guests, but we shouldn't feel inferior. Maintain your dignity." Marcus's younger sisters, 13-year-old Zoe and 10-year-old Amara, were unusually quiet, awed by the grandeur of the house. A butler greeted them at the door and led the family through the foyer to an elegant dining room. The table was set with fine china and crystal, with a fresh flower arrangement in the center. The Bennet family was already waiting for them. "Denise, Marcus, welcome," Catherine greeted them warmly. "And this must be Zoe and Amara. Olivia is very excited to meet you." Olivia waved shyly, partially hiding behind her mother. Robert Bennet extended his hand. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." Denise shook the offered hand, her direct, steady gaze meeting the mayor's. "Thank you for the invitation, Mayor. Please. Tonight I'm just Robert." An uncomfortable silence ensued as everyone settled into their seats at the table. Two worlds, separated not only by Boston's urban geography, but by fundamentally different life experiences, now shared the same space. The initial conversation was polite and superficial, comments about the weather, compliments on the decor, questions about food preferences. Younger children, less aware of adult tensions, gradually began to loosen up. "Do you have a room of your own?" Amara asked Olivia, wide-eyed. "I have a room and a playroom," Olivia replied. Amara and Zoe exchanged impressed glances. The three of them shared a single room in the Johnson family apartment. During the first course, Catherine tried to break the ice. "Marcus, Olivia told us you want to study architecture. It's a fascinating field." Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I've always been fascinated by how spaces can influence people and communities." "And what architecture?" Robert asked, sounding genuinely interested. Marcus thought for a moment. "I grew up in a neighborhood where public spaces are neglected. Unmaintained parks, abandoned buildings, dilapidated schools. I realized that the environment affects how people feel about themselves and their possibilities. I want to create spaces that inspire, that make people believe they deserve beauty and functionality, regardless of where they live." Catherine seemed touched by the answer. Robert nodded thoughtfully. "A noble goal," the mayor commented. "But you know the city budget is limited. We have to make difficult choices about where to invest." Denise, who had remained silent until then, intervened. "Choices always seem harder when they affect certain neighborhoods, don't they, Mayor?" Tension rose instantly. Robert straightened his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Denise," Catherine tried to soothe, "we agreed not to discuss politics tonight." "I'm not discussing politics, Catherine," Denise replied calmly. "I'm talking about the reality we live in. When the minority scholarship program was cut, Marcus's dream of studying at MIT became practically impossible. This isn't politics. This is my son's life." Robert placed his cutlery on his plate, meeting Denise's gaze. "I understand your frustration," he said, measuring his words, "but you need to understand that the city is facing a significant budget deficit. We've had to make cuts across multiple sectors, not just scholarship programs. It's curious how cuts always seem to disproportionately affect neighborhoods with larger Black and Latino populations," Denise replied, her voice controlled but firm. Marcus glanced nervously at his sisters, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes. Catherine sensed the growing tension and intervened. "Perhaps we can discuss this another time. Tonight should be about bringing our families closer together." "And how can we bring our families closer together without honesty?" Denise questioned, softening her tone slightly. "My son helped your daughter without hesitation, regardless of who she was. That speaks volumes about his character and the values we teach in our home." A heavy silence fell over the table. Olivia glanced confusedly between the adults. "Why are you two fighting?" she asked innocently. "Didn't Marcus do something good?" The girl's question served as a reminder of what had initially brought the two families together. Robert sighed. "Yes, Olivia, he did something very good, and we're grateful for that." He turned to Marcus. "Your character is admirable, young man, and your mother is right to be proud of you." Denise nodded in acknowledgement, and the tension eased slightly. As the staff served the main course, Catherine tried to change the subject. "Denise, Marcus told us you're a nurse. It must be a rewarding job." "It's challenging," Denise replied, deciding to give the truce a chance. "I work mainly in the emergency room at Boston General. We see everything there, including many victims of the violence that plagues certain neighborhoods in the city," Robert commented, and then, realizing his mistake, quickly added, "It's a problem we're trying to address with new public safety programs." "The problem isn't just public safety," Marcus interjected, surprising everyone. "It's a lack of opportunities. When young people don't see legitimate avenues, some choose alternative paths." Robert studied the young man with renewed interest. "You have a mature perspective for someone so young. I had to grow up fast, sir," Marcus replied without rancor. "Many young people in my neighborhood do." The younger children had been dismissed from the table after finishing their dishes, led by one of the maids to see Olivia's room. With only the adults and Marcus at the table, the conversation became more frank. "You know the press is having a field day with this whole situation," Robert said, pouring himself some wine. "They're using what happened to create a simplistic narrative about race and privilege." "And you think it's just a narrative?" Denise asked. "I think it's more complex than that," the mayor replied. "Boston does have racial problems. It would be foolish to deny it. But we've also made significant progress in recent decades." "Not enough," Denise countered. "Not when my son, despite being one of the top students in his school, faces more barriers to college than less qualified students from more privileged neighborhoods." Catherine, who had been listening intently, interjected. "You're both right. There has been progress, but not enough. The question is, what do we do now with all this attention on our families?" Marcus, who had remained silent during the most heated exchange, spoke up. "We can use this as an opportunity, not for me or for the Bennett family, but to start a real conversation about the divisions in our city." Everyone looked at the young man, surprised by his maturity. "What kind of conversation do you envision, Marcus?" Robert asked. "One that isn't just about pointing fingers, but about finding solutions, about how to build bridges between communities that rarely interact, about how to ensure that all children in Boston, regardless of their zip code, have real opportunities." A thoughtful silence followed his words. Robert studied the young man before him, seeing him in a new light. "You know," the mayor finally said, "when I entered politics, I had similar ideals to yours. I wanted to transform Boston into a model of equality and opportunity." "What happened?" Marcus asked, his voice devoid of accusation. Robert smiled humorlessly. "The reality of politics has set in. Compromises, donor pressure, resistance to change, endless budget battles. You start by making small concessions, and before you know it, you become part of the system you promised to change," Denise added. Robert nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I still believe I can make a difference from within the system." Catherine placed her hand over her husband's. "And perhaps this is the moment to remember why you entered politics in the first place, Robert." As dessert was served, something subtle had shifted in the dynamic between the two families. It hadn't become a friendship, nor had the fundamental differences disappeared, but a grudging respect had emerged, a mutual recognition of humanity. At the end of the evening, as the families said their goodbyes at the door, Robert made an unexpected gesture. He extended his hand to Marcus and said, "I'd like to talk to you more about your ideas for the city. Perhaps you could visit my office at City Hall next week." Marcus looked at his mother, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "It would be an honor, Mr. Mayor," she replied, shaking the offered hand. As the taxi pulled away from the mansion, Amara asked, "Are they bad people, Mum?" Denise thought carefully before answering. "No, dear. They're complicated people, like the rest of us. Maybe a little disconnected from the reality of families like ours, but not necessarily bad." Marcus stared out the window, observing the city lights. Boston seemed different tonight, unresolved in its conflicts, but at least navigable. "What are you going to tell him at City Hall?" Zoe asked. Marcus smiled at his sister. "The truth, only the truth. The mayor's office waiting room was imposing, with portraits of past Boston mayors on the walls and dark wood furniture that exuded tradition. Marcus, wearing the same blazer borrowed from dinner, tried to remain calm as he waited to be called. His mother had insisted he write a few notes about what he intended to say, and the folded paper weighed heavily in his pocket. "The mayor can see you now," the secretary announced, ushering him through a solid oak door. Robert Bennett was standing by the window that offered a panoramic view of Boston. Seeing Marcus, he walked toward him with a professional smile. "Marcus, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." The office was even more impressive than the waiting room, with shelves filled with books and carefully arranged political memorabilia. Marcus noticed a framed photograph on the mayor's desk, a much younger Bennett, at a civil rights demonstration in the 1990s. "Surprised?" Bennett asked, noticing Marcus's gaze on the photo. "A little," Marcus admitted. "I didn't picture you as an activist." Bennett took the framed photo. "I was an idealist. I believed I could change the world, or at least our city." A nostalgic smile crossed his face. "Some would say I sold out to the system. I would say I learned to work within it." "And was it worth it?" Marcus asked with a frankness that surprised them both. The mayor replaced the photo on the desk and sat down, motioning for Marcus to do the same. "Good question. Some days I think so. Others—" He trailed off. "But I didn't call you here to talk about my political journey. I want to hear your thoughts. Catherine told me you've been thinking a lot about what happened." Marcus nodded, gathering his thoughts. "Mr. Mayor, everyone is focused on the image. A young black man helping the mayor's white daughter after dozens of people ignored her. It's a powerful image, yes, but the cameras don't show everything." "What do you mean?" "They don't show that on that same day. In Roxbury, at least 3 black children were also lost or in vulnerable situations, and no one reported on them. They don't show the budget cuts that affect programs supporting underprivileged communities. They don't show what happens when the cameras turn off." Bennett listened intently without interrupting. "Everyone wants to turn this into a story about me, the young black hero, or about Olivia, the privileged girl lost. But it's much bigger than the two of us. It's about the city we built together, where some lives seem to matter more than others." "What do you suggest, then?" Bennett asked, leaning forward. Marcus pulled his notes from his pocket but didn't need to consult them. "3 things. First, restore funding for minority scholarship programs, not for my sake, but for the sake of the thousands of talented students who deserve a chance. Second, create an exchange program between schools in different neighborhoods so that Boston's youth can experience realities different from their own. Third, form a youth council with representatives from all neighborhoods, with real advisory power in decisions affecting their communities." Bennett drummed his fingers thoughtfully on the table. Ambitious proposals. The city council would question the budgetary impact. "With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, the cost of doing nothing is much greater in the long run, and I'm sure the story of your daughter and the black student who helped her would provide the political capital needed to pass these initiatives." A reluctant smile appeared on the mayor's face. "You have a future in politics, you know." "I prefer architecture, sir. Building real bridges, not just metaphorical ones." Just then, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Sandra Miller, the chief of staff, hurried in. "Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Mayor, but I think you both need to see this." She turned on the television on the wall of her office, tuning to a local news channel. The image showed a group of protesters in front of Boston Tech High School, holding signs with Marcus and Olivia's photos. The newscaster was talking about a protest against the political exploitation of the incident. Some protesters claim the Bennett administration is using the case to divert attention from the city's structural problems, while others argue that young Marcus Johnson is being politically exploited by vested interests. Bennett turned off the TV in frustration. "That's what happens when things become too symbolic. Everyone wants to use you, or rather your image, for their own ends." "Including you?" Marcus asked directly. Bennett looked at the young man, surprised by his candor, and then let out a short laugh. "Touché." He stood and walked to the window again. "You know, when I came to this office, I had a list of things I wanted to accomplish. Improve public schools, reduce inequality, combat institutional bias. And then the reality of municipal politics hit me like a train." "What reality?" "The reality that real change is slow and faces resistance from all sides. The reality that to achieve something, you have to give up something else. The reality that those with privilege rarely want to give it up voluntarily." Marcus joined the mayor at the window. Below, Boston stretched out in all directions. The skyscrapers of the financial district, the Victorian houses of Beacon Hill, and farther away the neighborhoods of Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, where most Black and Latino residents lived. "So, what are you going to do now?" Marcus asked. "Are you going to use what happened to your daughter for a photo op and then move on? Or are you going to actually do something meaningful?" Bennett studied the young man beside him, seeing not only the determination in his eyes, but also the hope, something he himself had lost over years of political commitment. "I think I need to remember why I got into politics in the first place," he finally said, "and maybe I need help from someone who hasn't yet become cynical." He extended his hand. "How about we work together, not to create a convenient narrative, but to make real change, starting with your 3 proposals." Marcus hesitated. "What if this is just another political gesture?" "Then you have every right to expose me publicly," Bennett replied with a weary smile. "But I prefer to think this is a rare moment when symbols and substance can converge." Marcus shook the offered hand, not naively, but with cautious determination. "I'll hold you to it, Mr. Mayor. I'm counting on it." When Marcus left the mayor's office that afternoon, he had no illusions about the magnitude of the challenge. The security cameras that had captured his encounter with Olivia didn't show the full context of a city divided by race and class. And the news cameras that now followed him didn't capture the complexity of what was at stake. But maybe, he thought as he walked down the steps of City Hall, what mattered wasn't what the cameras showed, but what people chose to do after the lights went out. The sudden fame came at a price Marcus hadn't anticipated. 2 weeks after his meeting with the mayor, as news of his collaboration with the Bennett administration began to circulate, reactions were intense and polarized. "Sold." The graffiti on Marcus's locker door in the school hallway was the first indication that not everyone viewed his rapprochement with the mayor positively. "Ignore it," Jamal advised, as Marcus stared at the red letters. "They're just jealous people." But it wasn't just jealousy. During lunch, Marcus noticed the divided looks. Some classmates treated him with renewed admiration, others with blatant suspicion. "I heard the mayor is paying for your entire college education," commented Lisa Chen, a fellow calculus student sitting at Marcus's table. "Is that true?" Before he could respond, Andre Williams, one of the leaders of the school's Black activist group, intervened. "Why do you think he's helping the mayor? He needed a smiling black kid in the photos for programs that further cut resources from our communities." "It's not like that," Marcus tried to explain. "I'm working with him to restore scholarships for minorities and create new programs. And you really believe he'll keep those promises?" Andre laughed humorlessly. "How many politicians have come to our neighborhoods, taken photos with black children, and then disappeared?" The discussion was interrupted when Principal Jones approached. "Marcus, there's a news crew at the entrance." "Again, I told them you're in class, but they're persistent." Marcus sighed. It was the 3rd group of reporters that week. At home, the situation wasn't much better. The attention had brought veiled threats, racist comments online, and a steady stream of strangers trying to contact the Johnson family. Denise had been forced to change her phone number after she started receiving calls in the middle of the night. Marcus's younger sisters were escorted to school by neighbor volunteers, a precaution against potential harassment. "This isn't what I wanted," Marcus blurted during a particularly quiet family dinner. "I just helped a lost child." "You did the right thing," Denise reaffirmed, serving the last bit of stew they had. "And now you're trying to do something bigger. Don't let them discourage you." "But what if Andre is right? What if the mayor is just using me to improve his image?" Denise put down her spoon thoughtfully. "Maybe he is. Politicians always have multiple motivations. The question is, are you getting your ideas across?" Marcus nodded slowly. "The proposal for the Youth Council is already being drafted, and the mayor has agreed to present the restoration of scholarships at the next budget meeting." "Then use the platform while you have it," Aunt Tanya interjected. She had temporarily moved into the Johnson apartment to help with the younger children. "But keep your eyes open." At the Bennett household, a parallel dynamic was developing. Robert faced criticism from all sides, from conservatives who accused him of caving to progressive pressures, and from progressives who saw his rapprochement with Marcus as political opportunism. "Did you see the story in the Globe?" Catherine asked, handing the newspaper to her husband over breakfast. The headline was scathing. "Bennett uses black student as political shield? Robert read it quickly and tossed the paper aside in irritation. We're really trying to do something substantial here, and they reduce it all to political calculation. It's the game you've chosen to play, dear, Catherine replied calmly. What about you? Do you still think we should go through with it? Catherine watched Olivia, who was quietly drawing in the corner of the room. Since the incident, the girl had become more thoughtful, asking questions that surprised her parents with their depth. Yesterday, Olivia asked me why Marcus's neighborhood looks so different from ours. Why the schools there have fewer books, why the parks have fewer toys. What should I tell her? Robert didn't answer immediately. This isn't just about politics, Robert. It's about what kind of city we want to leave for our children. The next day, the mayor's office was in an uproar. The first meeting of the task force to implement Marcus's proposals was scheduled, and several departments had sent representatives. Marcus arrived punctually, wearing a dress shirt borrowed from a church donation program. He immediately felt out of place among the professionals in suits and briefcases, but he maintained the erect posture his mother always insisted was essential. "Marcus, I'm glad you're here," Sandra Miller greeted him. "The mayor is finishing up an important call and will join us in a few minutes." The conference room quickly filled up. Career city officials, representatives from the education department, political aides, all casting curious glances at the young man who had generated so much controversy. "So you're the famous Marcus," commented a middle-aged man with a finance department badge. "I must say you've caused quite a stir in our budget." "Jerome, please," Sandra interjected. "Marcus is here as the mayor's special advisor on youth affairs." "Advisor?" Another official chuckled quietly. Interesting title for a high school student. Marcus felt his face heat up, but before he could respond, the door opened and Mayor Bennett walked in, followed by his close-knit staff. "Sorry I'm late, let's get started." He nodded to Marcus. "Thank you for coming." The meeting continued with formal introductions and an explanation of the scope of work. As city officials raised technical objections and bureaucratic obstacles to the proposals, Marcus began to understand the frustrating government slowness Bennett had mentioned. The school exchange program would require approval not only from the city council, but also from the State Board of Education, the education representative explained, and there are issues of security, insurance, transportation. As for the youth council, another official interjected, "We don't have the budget for that kind of initiative in the current fiscal year." Marcus watched the mayor, expecting him to vigorously defend the proposals, but Bennett seemed resigned, as if he had expected all this resistance. During a break, Marcus found the mayor alone by the coffee maker. "Is it always like this?" he asked, unable to hide his frustration. Bennett smiled mirthlessly. "Welcome to government bureaucracy, Marcus. That's why so many good ideas die slowly in committees and technical reviews. So you're going to give up?" The direct question seemed to spark something in the mayor. "No, I won't. And neither should you." He placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Do you know why they're putting up so much resistance? Because they know these proposals, especially the Youth Council, represent a real shift in the balance of power, and those with power rarely give it up willingly." When the meeting resumed, Bennett surprised everyone by slamming his fist firmly on the table. "I've heard enough reasons why we can't get things done. Now I want to hear proposals on how we can make them happen. This isn't just another project for my administration. It's a personal priority." 3 months after the original incident, Boston's autumnal weather had given way to the first hints of winter. In the City Hall meeting room, the Special Committee for implementing the Johnson Initiatives, as they were officially called, was in full session. Marcus, now a regular at city meetings, watched as Sandra Miller presented the numbers on the pilot school exchange program. In recent weeks, 5 schools had participated, with students from Roxbury visiting institutions on Beacon Hill and vice versa. "The preliminary results are encouraging," Sandra explained. 92% of participants reported positive changes in their perceptions of students from different socio-economic backgrounds. Marcus smiled quietly. The program had been the first of his proposals to get off the ground, thanks to an administrative maneuver that classified it as an extension of existing educational programs, thus avoiding the need for full legislative approval. "What about the Youth Council?" asked Robert Bennett, who chaired the meeting. Michael Torres, the person in charge of this initiative, seemed less optimistic. "We're facing resistance from some city council members. They argue that creating an advisory body with guaranteed representation for all neighborhoods sets a problematic precedent." Problematic for whom? Marcus asked, unable to contain his frustration. For the status quo, the mayor replied with a weary smile, but we'll keep pushing. After the meeting, Bennett invited Marcus to his office for a private conversation. In the months of working together, a complex relationship had developed between them, not exactly friendship, but a grudging mutual respect. You've probably noticed that progress in the public sector is painfully slow, Bennett commented, pouring himself a coffee. Did I offer you something, Marcus? No, thank you, Marcus replied. He had learned to navigate these spaces of power with a mixture of courtesy and vigilance. And yes, I've noticed the slowness, but I've also noticed how some things can happen surprisingly quickly when the political will is there. Bennett nodded, acknowledging the point. True, and that's why I called you here today. We need to talk about restoring the grant program. Marcus's heart raced. This was the proposal most important to him personally, but also the one facing the most financial resistance. The Budget Committee will vote next week, Bennett continued. I've been counting votes, and we're dangerously close to defeat. But you're the mayor, Marcus protested. Can't you just order it? Bennett laughed humorlessly. Ah, if power worked that way. No, I need a majority on the committee, and right now we're tied. We need one more vote. And what can we do? That's where things get complicated. Bennett hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Councilwoman Eleanor Simmons might be persuaded to vote with us. She represents an upper-middle-class district that traditionally opposes budget increases for social programs. Then how can we convince her? She has one condition, Bennett explained, looking uncomfortable. She wants you to appear at a fundraiser for her re-election campaign, as the young man who built bridges between divided communities. Marcus felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. She wants to use me as a symbol for her campaign, the same person who consistently voted against programs that would benefit my community. Politics is the art of compromise, Marcus, Bennett replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't comfortable with the situation either. Compromise or co-optation? Marcus stood, walking to the window. Outside, Boston stretched out in its contradictory beauty, the historic city that fought so hard for freedom, yet remained deeply segregated. If I show up at this event, I'll essentially be endorsing someone whose policies harm my own community, Marcus reflected. But if I don't show up, we could lose funding for scholarships that would benefit hundreds of students like me. Bennett watched the young man, respecting his moral dilemma. Welcome to my world, Marcus. That's what I meant about making compromises that eventually transform you into someone you never imagined yourself to be. Marcus stared at the mayor. And do you think it's worth it? It depends on what you get in return, Bennett replied honestly. If the scholarship program is restored, hundreds of students will have opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist. But the cost, well, the cost is something only you can decide if you're willing to pay. As Marcus left City Hall that afternoon, snow was beginning to fall gently over Boston. He walked slowly, lost in thought, to the bus stop. His phone vibrated, a message from his mother asking how the meeting had gone. How could he explain the dilemma he faced? At dinner, after his younger sisters had been sent to bed, Marcus finally shared the situation with Denise. Councilwoman Simmons, Denise frowned, the same one who said social programs create dependency and voted against expanding health services to underserved neighborhoods. Marcus nodded. That's the same one. And Bennett wants you to be her poster boy? He says it's the only way to secure her vote for restoring the scholarships. Denise sighed deeply, setting aside her cutlery. Marcus, do you remember what your father always said before he left us? Marcus smiled sadly. His father had died when he was only 9, the victim of a construction accident. That our integrity is the one thing no one can take from us unless we allow it. Exactly. Denise held her son's hand. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're almost a man now and you need to make your own decisions. But think about what this photo would mean. Not just for her political career, but for yourself when you look in the mirror. That night, Marcus barely slept. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of his father, of Olivia lost on the street, of Councilwoman Simmons's face smiling for the cameras as he stood beside her like a silent trophy. The next day, Marcus requested an urgent meeting with Bennett. He was received not in his formal office, but in a small cafe 2 blocks from City Hall. We need discretion sometimes, the mayor explained, dressed casually instead of his usual suit. Here we can speak more freely. Marcus got straight to the point. "I can't do that. I can't show up at Councilwoman Simmons's event." Bennett didn't seem surprised. "I understand, and I respect your decision, even though it complicates our chances of approving the scholarship program." "I have a counter-proposal," Marcus said, surprising the mayor. In recent weeks he had learned a lot about the inner workings of municipal power. "I know Councilwoman Miller's husband is involved in a real estate development project at the port that needs expedited approval." Bennett raised his eyebrows. "You've been investigating." "Just observing. The point is, you have influence in the permitting department. If you can expedite the approvals for this project, perhaps Councilwoman Miller will consider supporting the grant program in return." A reluctant smile formed on the mayor's face. "Quid pro quo. That's how the game is played, isn't it?" Marcus asked, his voice mixing determination with a hint of sadness at the loss of a certain innocence. Bennett studied the young man before him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just a naive idealist. Now I see there's so much more to you." "Is that a compliment?" "I'm not sure," Bennett replied honestly. "But I'll do what I can with Councilwoman Miller. No guarantees, you understand." "I understand. What if it doesn't work out?" Spring has arrived in Boston, bringing with it not only the blossoming of cherry blossoms in the public garden, but also a subtle shift in the city's dynamics. 6 months had passed since Marcus found Olivia lost on Newbury Street, and the impact of that chance encounter continued to reverberate in ever-widening circles. At Boston Tech High School, the student body gathered in the auditorium for the official inauguration of the first phase of the Inter-School Exchange Program, now officially dubbed the Boston Bridges Initiative. On stage, Marcus sat uncomfortably next to Mayor Bennett, Principal Wilson, and representatives from 5 participating schools. "It is with great pride that we announce the expansion of this program to 10 additional schools next semester," the mayor declared into the microphone, "proving that when we break down the barriers that separate us, we all emerge stronger." Applause resounded throughout the auditorium. Marcus scanned the faces in the audience, some enthusiastic, some skeptical, many simply curious. His gaze met that of Andre Williams, the student activist who had initially accused him of being a sellout. Surprisingly, Andre offered a barely perceptible nod of acknowledgement. After the event, as the students dispersed, Andre approached Marcus. "I didn't think it would actually happen," he admitted, gesturing toward the exchange program posters. "I thought it would just be another empty political promise." Marcus shrugged. "I had my doubts too. I still have reservations about working so closely with the system," Andre continued. "But I can't deny that you've achieved concrete results. The scholarship program saved my cousin's college dream." Those words meant more to Marcus than all the formal praise and official recognition he had received. It was validation from someone in his own community, someone who had initially doubted his intentions. "Thank you," he replied simply. "That means a lot." Andre hesitated. "Just know that I will still criticize anything I find wrong." Marcus smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less." That same day, across town, Catherine Bennett accompanied Olivia on a visit to the Roxbury Public Library. What had begun as a formal event, the mayor's wife promoting reading in underserved neighborhoods, had become a personal commitment for Catherine. "Mum, can I take this too?" Olivia asked, holding up a book about young activists. "Sure, honey," Catherine replied, noting how her daughter had become more self-aware in recent months. Olivia's questions about inequality and social justice were becoming increasingly insightful, often leaving her parents without easy answers. Seated at one of the library tables was Marcus's sister, Zoe, engrossed in a geometry book. The two girls had developed an unlikely friendship since dinner at the Bennett mansion. Though they attended different schools and came from distant worlds, they had discovered a connection based on mutual curiosity and genuine respect. "Hello, Mrs. Bennett," Zoe greeted politely, looking up from her book. "Hello, Zoe. Studying for any tests?" "Math Olympiad," the girl replied determinedly. "I want to get into the advanced program next year." "Zoe is amazing at math," Olivia declared admiringly. "She taught me how to do equations that aren't even in my textbook yet." Catherine smiled, remembering how Olivia had cried in frustration over her math homework just a few months ago. Her friendship with Zoe had sparked not only a renewed interest in her studies, but also a confidence she'd previously lacked. "The exchange program starts at my school next week," Zoe commented. "We're hosting students from Beacon Hill Academy." "Are you excited?" Catherine asked. A little nervous, the girl admitted. But Marcus says it's important to meet people who are different from you, that it makes us more, as he said, empathetic. Meanwhile, at City Hall, Robert Bennett was concluding a tense meeting with City Council members about the implementation of the Youth Advisory Board, Marcus's third and most controversial proposal. With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, argued Councilman Thomas Reynolds, representing a predominantly white and affluent district, giving formal advisory power to inexperienced young people sets a dangerous precedent. They're not taking over the city, Thomas, Bennett countered with practiced patience. They're being asked to offer perspectives on decisions that directly affect their lives and communities. And why does representation need to be proportional by district? Reynolds insisted. That practically guarantees a majority of young people from, well, certain communities. You mean young black and Latino people? Bennett asked directly. Months ago, he would have avoided this kind of confrontation, preferring ambiguous diplomacy. But his work with Marcus had renewed a candor he had lost over the years. Politics. Reynolds looked uncomfortable. I'm concerned about qualifications, not demographics. Their qualifications are precisely their demographics, Thomas. They are experts in their own lived experiences that we sitting in this room simply don't share. The meeting ended without a definitive resolution, but Bennett sensed that resistance was slowly waning. The timing seemed opportune, public sentiment favorable. The Johnson initiatives, as they were popularly known, had generated positive headlines and raised his approval ratings to levels he hadn't seen in years. But as he walked back to his office, Bennett wondered how much of his current support was based on genuine conviction and how much was political calculation. The line had become so blurred that he could no longer clearly distinguish it. His phone vibrated with a message from Catherine. I ran into Zoe at the library. Dinner with the Johnsons on Friday? I think it's time to celebrate the success of the exchange program. Bennett smiled. What had begun as a political obligation to thank the young man who had helped his daughter had gradually transformed into something neither of them had anticipated, a genuine connection between two families who otherwise would never have met. That evening, Marcus was invited to speak at a community event in Roxbury. The cultural centre was packed, locals, activists, educators, all eager to hear the young man who had become an unlikely bridge between divided worlds. I never planned any of this, Marcus began without prepared notes. I just did what anyone should do, help someone in need. He paused, scanning the attentive faces in the audience. A full year had passed since that morning on Newbury Street. Boston was now experiencing an exceptionally hot summer, with families seeking relief from public fountains and ice cream parlors packed into every neighborhood. In the Johnsons' apartment, Marcus was surrounded by moving boxes. An acceptance letter from MIT, along with the notification of a full scholarship, part of the revived program that now bore his name, was framed on the living room wall. Are you sure you didn't forget anything? Denise asked, checking the half-open suitcase on the floor. Briefcases, charger? Mum, I'm only going to be gone for 2 weeks, Marcus laughed, and Cambridge is literally just across the river. The MIT Architecture Immersion Program had selected Marcus from hundreds of applicants for its summer session. It was an exceptional opportunity to experience university life before officially starting in the fall. Let the boy breathe, Denise, joked Aunt Tanya, who now lived permanently with them, having taken over the room Marcus would vacate. He earned it. The phone rang. It was Catherine Bennett, inviting the family to a farewell barbecue at the mansion before Marcus's departure. Over the past few months, alternating dinners between the Bennett and Johnson residences had become a unique tradition that neither family could have imagined a year ago. Of course we'll go, replied Denise, who had developed a genuine, if sometimes strained, friendship with Catherine. Differences between the two women persisted, but they had found common ground in their commitment to education and raising thoughtful children in a complex world. At the Bennett residence, Robert was reviewing speeches for the one-year anniversary of the Johnson initiatives. What had begun as a calculated political gesture had evolved into the most successful and popular project of his administration. The exchange program now involved 23 schools. The Youth Advisory Board, after months of heated debate, had finally been established and was already making substantive recommendations on municipal policies. And the scholarship program had benefited more than 200 students in its first cycle. How's the speech going? Catherine asked, entering the office with a pitcher of lemonade. Honestly, I hope, Bennett replied, rubbing his tired eyes. I'm trying to properly acknowledge Marcus's role without turning him into a political symbol. Catherine smiled. Quite a challenge, considering he's already a symbol, whether he likes it or not. Indeed, the image of Marcus and Olivia had transcended the original episode, becoming a symbol of possibility and reconciliation in a historically divided city. Academics were writing articles about the Johnson effect. Community organizations were citing it in their campaigns for equity. Politicians across the spectrum were trying to capitalize on the narrative. "Do you think we made a real difference?" Bennett asked, revealing a vulnerability he rarely displayed publicly. "Or did we just create a feel-good story to make ourselves feel better about persistent structural problems?" Catherine reflected before answering. "I think maybe it's not an or, but an and. We created a good story, yes, a comfortable narrative about bridges being built, but we also made concrete changes that affect real lives." At Massachusetts General Hospital, Denise Johnson was finishing her shift when a young nurse approached her nervously. "Mrs. Johnson? I wanted to thank you personally. I'm one of the beneficiaries of the scholarship program your son helped restore. It changed my life." Denise smiled, hugging the young woman briefly. Moments like this were becoming more frequent. Meetings with people whose lives had been touched, directly or indirectly, by the chain of events her son had set in motion. At Boston Tech High, an extraordinary graduation ceremony was taking place. Although the school year had already ended, this special celebration was for the participants in the first full cycle of the exchange program. In the decorated auditorium, students from different neighborhoods, races, and social classes presented collaborative projects developed throughout the year. A community mural painted by students from Beacon Hill and Roxbury, an urban revitalization proposal created by students from Back Bay and Dorchester, a documentary about family histories produced by young people from East Boston and the South End. Among the guests was the entire city council, including the once skeptical Councilman Reynolds, who now publicly supported expanding the program to more schools. "Impressive, huh?" commented Jamal, Marcus's best friend, who now served as a mentor to new participants. "Who would have thought finding a lost little girl would lead to all this?" That night, the barbecue at the Bennett residence brought together an unlikely group. The entire Johnson family, the mayor and his wife, Olivia and her school friends, including Zoe, some Boston Tech professors, and even Andre Williams, whose constructive criticism had become a valuable part of the initiative's implementation process. In the well-tended garden with the Boston skyline in the background, Marcus chatted with Olivia, now an articulate and curious 9-year-old. "Do you think I'll be mayor one day like my dad?" she asked, nibbling on a fruit skewer. Marcus smiled. "You can be anything you want, Olivia. But I want to make a difference like you." "There are many ways to make a difference," Marcus replied gently. "Some people do it by being mayors, others by being teachers, doctors, or artists. The important thing is to always look around you and see who needs help, like you did with me that day." "Exactly." Across the garden, Robert Bennett watched the interaction, reflecting on how his daughter had become more insightful and compassionate over the year. The friendships she had developed with children from diverse backgrounds, especially Zoe, had expanded her worldview in ways no formal education could provide. "Thinking about her political future," Catherine joked, following her gaze. Bennett laughed. "Actually, I was thinking that perhaps we benefited more from this experience than we initially imagined." "What do you mean?" "Look at Olivia. Look at us. When was the last time we had such a diverse group in our home? Not for a political event, but for a genuine celebration." Catherine nodded, understanding. The barriers that have fallen were not just for Marcus and his community, but for us as well. As the sun set over Boston, the guests gathered for an impromptu toast to Marcus's future at MIT. As everyone raised their glasses, Denise Johnson asked for a moment to speak. "A year ago, my son did something any decent person would do. He stopped to help a lost child. He didn't know she was the mayor's daughter. He didn't expect recognition or reward. He simply saw someone in need and acted." She paused, overcome with emotion. What happened next, none of us could have predicted. But today, seeing all of you here, people who probably never would have met if not for that moment, I realize that sometimes small acts of kindness have the power to trigger ripples of change that go far beyond our initial intentions. Marcus watched his mother proudly, thinking of all the nights she'd come home exhausted from double shifts at the hospital. but still found the energy to help him with his homework or listen to his architecture dreams. So I toast not only to Marcus's brilliant future at MIT, Denise continued, but to all of us for having the courage to allow a simple moment of human connection to transform us. As everyone applauded and drank to Marcus's health, Olivia shyly approached him, holding a small wrapped package. "I made this for you to take to your dorm," she said, handing him the gift. Marcus carefully opened the package, revealing a framed drawing. It showed two figures holding hands, a small blonde girl and a tall young black man, walking down a colorful street. Above them, written in a child's shaky handwriting, was, "Sometimes we have to get lost to find the right path." With tears in his eyes, Marcus hugged Olivia, realizing the cycle had come full circle. What had begun with him helping a frightened girl had become something mutually transformative. He had reached out to her that day on Newbury Street, but she and her family had, in their own way, reached back, creating possibilities that had previously seemed unattainable. And as dusk fell over the Bennett's garden, laughter and conversation filling the air, Marcus realized the real story wasn't about a black teenager helping the mayor's white daughter. It was about a city slowly, imperfectly, but persistently learning to see beyond its historical divisions, one moment at a time, one connection at a time, one child at a time. It was a particularly sunny September morning. On the MIT campus, the buzz of Freshman Week filled the spaces between historic buildings and modernist structures. Marcus Johnson walked down the endless corridor, as the long hall connecting several campus buildings was known, carrying a folder of drawings and a laptop. His first official semester was about to begin, after a transformative summer in the immersion program. As he walked, he noticed the occasional glances of recognition. Even here, a year later, his story still resonated. "You're Marcus Johnson, right?" asked an Asian student who approached shyly. "I read about you in the campus newspaper. I'm Emma Chen, also a freshman. Architecture?" "That's right," Marcus smiled, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Emma. Your work with the Johnson Initiatives inspired something similar in my hometown Seattle," she commented as they walked together. "Especially the student exchange program. It's amazing how an idea can spread, isn't it?" It was something Marcus was still learning to process, how his story had transcended Boston, inspiring similar initiatives in other cities. The Johnson model, as some academics called it, was being adapted and implemented in communities facing their own racial and socio-economic divides. In the classroom of Professor Lawrence Taylor, one of the country's most respected urban architects, Marcus sat in the middle row, neither forward, showing anxiety, nor back, hiding. He had learned to occupy space with poised confidence, present without being overbearing, visible without seeking the spotlight. "Welcome to the Introduction to Social Architecture course," began the professor, a middle-aged black man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "This course explores how urban design can perpetuate or challenge structural inequalities in our cities." His eyes scanned the room, stopping briefly on Marcus. Architecture isn't just about creating beautiful or functional buildings. It's about shaping the spaces where human lives unfold, where communities form or fragment. The spaces we design can connect people or separate them, can invite or exclude, can honor diverse histories or privilege dominant narratives. Marcus took notes quickly, recognizing in these words the echo of his own thoughts about why he wanted to become an architect. After class, to his surprise, Professor Taylor called on him. "Mr. Johnson, I'd like to chat with you briefly. I've been following your work in Boston." "My work?" Marcus asked, confused. "The Johnson Initiatives," the professor clarified. "I was particularly interested in the collaborative design component, where students from different neighborhoods work together to reimagine public spaces in their communities." Marcus nodded, remembering the projects presented at the graduation ceremony. "I'm supervising a study on architecture as a tool for social justice, and I'd like to invite you to participate, if you're interested." As he walked back to his dorm, Marcus reflected on how that simple act a year ago, stopping to help a lost child, continued to unfold into new opportunities and connections. In his room, Marcus turned on his computer for his weekly video call with his family. On the screen, familiar faces appeared, his mother in her nurse's uniform ready for her shift, Zoe proudly displaying a math medal, and Amara, now 11, drawing something as they chatted. "How was your first official day?" Denise asked, the tiredness evident on her face but pride shining in her eyes. "Amazing," Marcus replied, telling her about Professor Taylor's invitation. "And how are things going over there?" "Zoe was selected for the advanced program," Denise announced proudly. "And guess who helped her study for the admissions test?" "Olivia?" Marcus ventured, smiling. "Twice a week, via video call," Denise confirmed. "Catherine brings her here occasionally too." The friendship between Olivia and Zoe had blossomed in ways no one could have predicted, creating a permanent bridge between the Johnson and Bennett families. "And the initiatives continue to expand," Denise added. "The Youth Council submitted a proposal to renovate Roxbury Park, and the mayor approved full funding." The conversation continued for a few minutes, until Denise had to leave for her shift at the hospital. Before hanging up, she looked seriously at her son. "We're all so proud of you, Marcus. Not just for MIT, but for everything you've unleashed. Your father would be overflowing with pride." After the call, Marcus opened the small package that had arrived in the mail. It was a copy of the Boston Globe with a front-page story about the one-year anniversary of the Johnson initiatives. The headline read, "How One Moment Changed a City. 1 year later, Boston reflects on real transformation." Beside the lead story was an opinion column written by Mayor Bennett himself, titled, "What I Learned from Marcus Johnson." Curious, Marcus began reading. "A year ago, when my daughter got lost in downtown Boston, a 17-year-old did what dozens of adults didn't. He stopped to help. What followed wasn't just a story about race, privilege, or politics, but a profound lesson in how small acts of compassion can spark systemic change when they find open ears and hearts." As mayor, I had grown accustomed to thinking in terms of broad policies, budgets, and statistics. Marcus Johnson reminded me that behind every statistic are real people with dreams, struggles, and immense potential. He challenged me to re-examine not just my policies, but my own assumptions about who deserves opportunities and why. The Johnson initiatives aren't perfect. Boston remains a deeply unequal city, with historical scars that well-intentioned programs can't erase. But I've witnessed something that gives me genuine hope. I've seen students from diverse backgrounds develop friendships their parents never had. I've seen the Youth Council present innovative solutions to problems adults considered intractable. I've seen families transcend barriers of race and class to find shared humanity. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: meaningful change rarely comes from the top down. Often it begins with a single moment of human connection that reminds us of our responsibility to one another. Marcus Johnson didn't intend to start a movement, but by reaching out to a lost child, he showed us the transformative power of compassion in action. Marcus closed the newspaper, feeling a mix of emotions. He'd learned to be wary of political rhetoric, but he sensed sincerity in the mayor's words. Bennett had changed over the past year, not dramatically, not completely, but in subtle and meaningful ways. His phone vibrated with a message from Catherine Bennett. "Robert just told me you've been invited to Professor Taylor's special program. Olivia is asking if we can visit you on campus when we go to Cambridge next month." Before he could respond, another notification popped up, this time an email from the National Association of Student Architects, inviting him to speak at a conference on urban design and social justice. The topic he'd casually mentioned during his impromptu speech in Roxbury was now becoming his professional path. Looking out his dorm window at the historic campus, Marcus thought about how life could completely change based on small decisions. If he'd gone straight that day, like the dozens of people who passed Olivia without stopping, where would he be now? Probably still at MIT, thanks to his talent and determination, but without the transformative experiences that had expanded his vision of possibilities. His phone rang again. It was Andre Williams. "Hey, MIT genius," Andre joked. "I'm calling to ask for a favor. I'm organizing a workshop on community activism at Boston Tech next month, and I was wondering if you could come back and speak to the freshmen. Many are inspired by your example, but they need to understand that real change requires more than symbols and pretty stories." Marcus smiled. Andre continued to be the necessary critical voice, ensuring that substance prevailed over symbols. "Sure," he replied. "When you need me, I'll be there." After hanging up, Marcus opened his drawing folder. Among his class projects was a personal sketch he'd been developing in his spare time, a community center for Roxbury, designed with architectural elements that symbolized bridges, connections, and shared spaces. In the corner of the drawing, he'd written a quote he'd recently discovered from anthropologist Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. As the sun set over Cambridge, casting long shadows across the historic campus, Marcus reflected on the continuing echoes of that simple gesture a year ago. Stopping to help Olivia hadn't just changed his personal trajectory or impacted the Bennett administration. It had created a ripple effect of small moments of connection, students from different neighborhoods becoming friends, families traditionally separated by socioeconomic lines finding common ground, young people from marginalized communities gaining a voice in decision-making processes. None of these changes by themselves solved Boston's deeply rooted structural problems. Segregation persisted. Economic inequality remained alarming. Institutional racism remained entrenched in systems and practices. But something had fundamentally shifted in the public conversation. Where once there had been cynical resignation or comfortable denial, there was now a broader recognition of shared responsibilities. The image of 47 adults passing by a lost child before anyone stopped to help had become a powerful metaphor that resonated with people of all backgrounds. Marcus's phone vibrated with one last message of the day, a text from Olivia. "My teacher asked us to write about our hero. Guess who I chose to write about? Thank you for helping me that day, Marcus. You changed everything." Marcus smiled, replying, "You changed everything too, Olivia. We're part of the same story now." Putting away his phone, Marcus returned to his drawing of the community center. As a future architect, he now understood that his job would not just be to build physical structures, but to create spaces where human connections could flourish, invisible bridges between worlds that rarely touched. As he worked on the project, the sunset light bathed the room in golden hues, and Marcus remembered something his mother often said: "Sometimes all we need is for someone to stop and notice." On an ordinary autumn morning in Boston, he had stopped and noticed a lost little girl. And in that simple act of humanity, something much greater had begun. Not a magical solution to the city's complex problems, but a powerful reminder that the first step toward change is simply seeing each other as fully human, worthy of care, help, and respect. As night fell over the campus, Marcus closed his sketchbook, satisfied with his progress. Tomorrow would be another day of classes, new challenges, new connections. The story continued to unfold, not just for him, but for everyone whose lives had been touched by the echoes of that simple gesture. And perhaps this was the most important lesson of all, that our choices, even the seemingly small ones, contain within them the potential for transformation far beyond anything we could imagine. That when we choose to see each other, truly see, something fundamental changes in the fabric of our communities. A lost girl, a teenager who stopped to help. Our city forced to confront its contradictions, and at the center of it all the simplest and most profound truth: we are all part of the same story, connected by invisible threads that, when recognized and strengthened, can begin to weave a more just and compassionate world.